Okay, let's see. So we're doing Yasmin. I think this is part 3. Here's my couch. Okay. She kept up her correspondence with CAIR Care, which, though it was now overwhelmed by the fallout from September 11th attacks, still continued to advocate for Yasmin. CARE sent another letter to the principal, enclosing one of its pamphlets titled An Educator's Guide to Islamic Religious Practices. Thank you so much for helping me, she wrote in November 2001, especially while your hands are full enough with everything that's happened. She enrolled again in leadership. It continued to be one of her favorite classes, and she would repeatedly confront the COSA with arguments as to why she should be able to run again in the elections. Still, she got nowhere. By the end of the fall semester, she was putting pressure on her younger sister, who had just entered the school to run for freshman representative. The election cycle for freshman representative begins in January, and Yasmin thought Miriam should run on a principal. I don't know, Miriam said. Look at what happened to you. But Yasmin was insistent. Come on, Miriam. That's why you have to, she whined. Then it's 2 against the world instead of just 1. Miriam capitulated. That means gave in. She picked up the application form when it was made available, and as expected, it contained the same language in the Declaration of Consent that had disqualified Yasmin from running. This time, Yasmin instructed Miriam to write, as long as it doesn't conflict with our religious beliefs, at the end of the paragraph. Miriam initialed the addition and had her father stipulate and initial the form where it asked for his signature. She then handed in the documents. In return, Miriam received a letter from the student organization president. We have received your signed declaration, it read. However, we regret to inform you that we cannot accept this declaration with your stipulated conditions. It is impossible to know from your statement what terms you are willing to agree to. Therefore, your name will not appear on the ballot for 2002 unless we have your declaration signed without any additional conditions made by any persons and or organizations other than the student organization of Fort Hamilton High School. For your convenience, enclosed is another declaration form. You may begin campaigning as soon as your form is signed unconditionally and filed with the student organization. Yasmin expected opposition from the school, but then her family started to turn against her. Her father sent an angry letter to the school, threatening legal actions if they didn't alter their policies, but at home, he was telling Yasmin to forget it. It was jeopardizing her medical school future. He already couldn't believe that she had enrolled in leadership after all the problems she'd had. Nor could he fathom the amount of time Yasmin was spending on the issue. He would continue to walk into the computer room and find her sitting there with browsers open to legal websites and a guilty look on her face. Yasmin, he would say, sighing, what are you doing? Researching, she would answer, blushing. Then he would yell, stop wasting time. Do your homework instead. This isn't leading anywhere. He thought time would grow skin back over the wound, but she kept pulling at the scab. Big metaphor there. One afternoon, she was in the kitchen with her mother. Miriam walked in to get some food from the refrigerator. Her father had again told her to forget her battle. So Yasmin posed the question to her mother. What do you think? Should I keep fighting it, or is it worth it? Her mother looked at her kindly. It is taking up a lot of your time, she said with soft eyes. You could use that instead for your studying. Why waste your energy? Yasmin leaned on the fridge door while Miriam was rifling through the refrigerator for something to eat. What do you think? Yasmin asked her sister. Well, she said, stretching up. I don't know, she shrugged. They're not going to change their minds. Miriam had long ago given up her notions of becoming freshman representative, and Yasmin walked away hurt. She had considered Miriam her comrade in arms, her last best hope. Now that Miriam had quit the struggle, she felt she was fighting not just the the school, but also for her family. She felt like she was fighting not just the school, but her own family, and it was a heavy burden. Rather than deterring her, however, it hardened her resolve. She would try again this year to run, but this time for the presidency, regardless of how impossible that would be. She faxed the ACLU a 5-page single-spaced narrative of the events, hoping to enlist their help, but she heard nothing back from them. Meanwhile, CARE's civil rights coordinator called the school one day and spoke to the assistant principal, who told her that Yasmin and Miriam had to decide what is more important to them, their religion or the student body, and if they wanted to observe their religion, they should go to private school. The CARE coordinator was insulted by the comments and their tone, and CARE faxed a letter to the school again, affirming the case and now demanding an apology for these remarks. They asked for a meeting with the principal and also offered to present an educational forum on the Islamic way of life to the school. As before, the letter went unheeded. Then, in early 2002, there was a minor breakthrough. An attorney who worked with CARE agreed to meet with Yasmin and her father to discuss the case. She shook with excitement. Finally, concrete legal help was coming to her aid. She compiled all the paper she had and waited anxiously for the meeting, having realized a long time before now that she was powerless to change her world on her own. It was an early evening meeting, and Yasmin and her father took the subway to Midtown Manhattan after school. They exited the elevator and found the offices empty except for the attorney, who invited them in. Yasmin was impressed by the stately, reserved elegance of the place. A Muslim lawyer, she thought. That's awesome. He sat them down in a boardroom with a big oak table and asked Yasmin to explain the story. She immediately launched in by describing the Equal Access Act and the basics of contract law. Just explain the story to me, he said patiently. So she did. She took out her smiley face folder and detailed how she had won the election, been forced to resign, lost her right to run again, and everything else that had happened. He took notes on a yellow legal pad as she spoke, interspersed with nodding his head or humming assent. Yasmin finished, and then he spoke, first offering the now 17-year-old some advice. Whenever anyone said something related to the case, he told her, she should note what was said, the speaker, and the date. Yasmin listened with open ears and canyon-wide eyes. That will be your evidence, he said, and Yasmin nodded. So what should we do? She asked, almost holding her breath. He thought they had a case, he said, and she began breathing again. He couldn't promise they would win, he said, but there was a case to be made here, one that courts would decide. And then he started talking about money. He told Yasmin and her father that a lower court decision would require a $6,000 retainer. If it moved to a higher court, fees might reach $10,000 to $12,000. And he kept walking up the litigation ladder with higher figures and higher courts, while Yasmin nodded and her father said nothing. The meeting ended. Think about it, he said, as he showed them out. You know how to contact me. Now today they just go do a GoFundMe, right? For the first time the thought hit Yasmin. Wait, is my dad going to pay for this? He'd said it was worth it, she summarized. So he'd probably pay. Outside, Yasmin was bubbling with excitement over the meeting. She turned to her father. What do you think, Baba? They were walking to the subway, descending the stairs. It's a good case, Habibti, her father said, but I have 4 daughters. I have to put you all through college. Why are you glaring at me?
I told you to get me food.
You know what? That is just rude. I'm doing something for school. You go down and eat. No, that's not going to work.
You didn't even get me food.
Sweetie, there are cucumbers that you did not eat on the counter.
I don't like cucumbers because they're...
But then go get some
They're weird tasting and I don't like them anymore. They taste really weird.
Okay.
I want to watch Avatar.
Well, I'll put it on in a second. I gotta finish this bit. All right. I I can't pay $12,000 to $20,000 to bring a court case that we might lose. They waited on the platform, and suddenly Yasmin felt her imminent victory sliding away. But Baba, it's for a good cause. It's for all Muslims. If it becomes a good law, then it applies everywhere. She had learned this from her legal research. The subway roared in, all rattling noise and clanging steel. Think of the money, Yasmin. It wouldn't be fair to your sisters. They have to go to school, too. He paused. The conductor announced, "Stand clear, the closing doors, please." "We'll think about it," he said, which in Egyptian parent speak, as Yasmin well knew, really means no. In February, Yasmin took the lawyer's advice to heart. She was sitting in leadership class when the COSA explained that since Greek Easter begins on a Friday, Greek students in leadership would be excused from the bodybuilding event to be held on a weekend in May. In addition to dances, Yasmin didn't attend the school's bodybuilding contest, which she described in an email as a show of half-naked contestants flexing their muscles, which I feel is inappropriate. She scribbled a note on a piece of paper, beginning with the date and time of the COSA comment. 2/4/2. All right. So, Good Friday, Easter. Well, let's see. Greeks, you're going to get in trouble, will be excused from religious obligations. Then she quoted the COSA, "For religious obligations, I'm willing to make exceptions once in a while." She recalled when the e-board changed the date of a dance so it wouldn't conflict with one girl's private party, and wrote underneath, "Sweet 16, not a religious holiday, duh. Make one exception, 5 follow." Later, she found out that the e-board had put her on a maybe list to get kicked out of leadership. Okay, I'm going to stop there so I can yell at my daughter.